Okay, well, this is, I'm not Dr. Vassy and this is not Dr. Vassy, but this is your dance show for the evening. I guess they told us we'd have to sing or dance or something, but anyway, in a little bit of seriousness here, Dr. Vassy, his mother just had an emergency in South Carolina and he's on the road now and to go take care of her. Don't have a lot of details, but obviously our thoughts and prayers are with him now. But instead of, Liz, there's like 20 directors online and then a room full here or a lot in the room. We didn't really want to cancel the meeting since it's so hard to get everybody together. So Jim and I are going to try to just, I didn't get a chance to really talk to Matt. I saw the emails just like you've seen. So I have an idea of where maybe he was going with the meeting, but we're going to try to piece this together as best we can. This is interactive, so online, please, Gabby, if you could monitor that and let me know if someone has a question or wants to make a comment, please. This is really a team effort today, so it's not just us leading because I don't really know everything Matt wanted to do. So please, if you've communicated with him or if you have questions, you have thoughts, please jump in and help us out here and be interactive because we don't have a full agenda to just show you a bunch of slides or read things or go over things of that nature. But with that being said, I do know that Matt wanted to talk about something that we did several years ago. Now it's probably been, now that I think about it, probably 7 or 8, maybe 10 years ago. The Trauma Commission heard from, and again, we're going to ask the question here. Jim wanted to ask the question, is this an issue? Because obviously if there's not an issue, then we don't need to do anything. But about 10 years ago, I was been around long enough to know that when Jim Pettyjohn was executive director of the Trauma Commission, we heard from a lot of non-trauma centers, as well as some of the trauma centers, like there seems to be some communication issues. Who do we send? Who do we not send? What tests do we do before we send them to the trauma center? How long do we stay and play kind of thing? And the general feeling is that what we were hearing from the non-trauma center ER docs and sometimes nurse practitioners were that, well, you don't want to take our patients until we've done a very large workup and diagnose every problem. And probably, I feel like I remember at that time in a room just like this as trauma directors, we talked and we said, we actually did probably create a problem. We wanted people to diagnose problems and send us accurate information. And maybe we pushed back too hard on that. And now speed is really what we're into. Maybe we should back off on that a little bit and tell the doctors at the other hospitals and the non-trauma centers, it's okay to send that patient without getting 10 CT scans and so on and so forth. And so what we did was we came up with, can you go back, Gabby, to that other one? We came up with the first one you had up. I don't remember which, no, the other first one, the other first, there you go. We got a lot of first here. We came up with a document that was really a poster that sort of like the burn posters I think we're all familiar with, the rule of nines. And I forget what size it was, but it was probably 2 foot by 3 foot or something like that, and that you could put in your ER and it would sort of tell you if your patient has these things, consider. It wasn't mandatory, but it's just sort of like to help you remember, especially if you're not a trauma center and you're not used to doing this every day, who you should at least consider transferring. And with that, we all the trauma directors at that time, we did a letter and then we all signed it at the bottom. And we basically owned our sin. We said, over the years, we've told you to, really work hard, diagnose problems, send us complete record and patients. And we want to change gears a little bit and back off on that. And now we want you, if you see you have a problem, I'll give you an example, if you've got a patient with some type of head injury, a blown pupil, comatose, and you've intubated them, it really doesn't matter what the CT scan shows if you don't have a neurosurgeon. It's sort of a moot point, isn't it? I mean, it's really, you've intubated, you've got IV started, you've done all you can do. They need to go. They need to be transported as quickly as possible. So it was things like that we put in the letter, like, you know, it's okay. We want to work on speed. It's okay for you to send us a patient if you don't have every test known to man. And that's how, what we put a letter with this poster and we sent it out to everybody. And, you know, I didn't get a lot of feedback. It's been a long time since we did it. I don't know if it was helpful or not. I'd like to think it was. I feel like we put a lot of work into it. So I think Matt, for whatever reason, I don't know if it came up in the meeting that maybe we needed to revisit that. Maybe we had survey, was it survey results? Yeah. Okay. Survey results that maybe we need to bring this up again. So I think his goal today was to get feedback from you all, and I'll stop there. Jim, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess just back up a little bit. Who here is from a level 4? Okay, who here is from a level 3? Okay, and a level 2? Okay, so we got a pretty good representation of all 1 through 4s. Based on how many transfers do level 2s and level 3s get from non-designated trauma centers? Do you guys get transfers from trauma transfers from facilities that aren't trauma centers at your level? And certainly level 1s and level 2s do. Certainly the pediatric centers do all the time. All right. So if you get transfers in, are those transfers delayed at all because of unnecessary workup, or do they get to you in a timely fashion? And especially the sick ones. I don't really care about the person with the broken tibia. I care about the people with a ruptured spleen or a hypotensive. Are those types of patients getting to you in a timely fashion, or do you think that they're staying too long at a non-designated center doing unnecessary workup? Is that a problem or not? I see that as a problem from a level 1 all the time. I don't know if that's a problem just universal to Memorial, or is it across the state? That's kind of the question I want to pose to people. Hang on, sir. We're online here.
Hi, my name's Robin Hatley. I'm at the Children's Hospital of Georgia in Augusta, Georgia. I'm the pediatric trauma TMD. Our biggest problem actually is transportation. And it's not, because I think the people, I work with a few of the people here. I'll tell them one thing. First of all, when they call me, yes, I'll take them. And the second thing I tell them is, you don't have to do anything. Get them here. Because if they call me, they want to send them. And it's interestingly enough, in peds, I think if there's any hesitation, I think a lot of the MPs, the ER docs, they want to get them out of their ER as quickly as possible. And I think for people just to say, I'll take them, how they're doing, you don't need to do a workup, we'll take care of everything. How long will it take to get from Waynesboro to here? And that's the biggest problem that I've seen. And the workup has been, because most of them, because we send out letters to say, we'll be happy to do the workup, because some of the workup is a little different. Sometimes we don't get the disc. Sometimes we have to repeat things. Sometimes the radiation dose is a little high, and everything is in gear. And it's not going to change anything that you do. That's the biggest thing.
Greg Patterson, Archbald in Thomasville, Georgia. I think prior to COVID, your question would have been valid, and I would have put a caveat on that question. Is in your system, being at Memorial, are any of those hospitals that are sending you patients that you think are taking too long, are they in your system? Because my hospital, most of what we transfer into our hospital is already in our system. So we have some way of giving them feedback, and we've kind of auto-corrected some of that problem. But after COVID, it's been the transportation issue. They're staying there. They may be, we may ask them to get a few more tests because they're staying there. Transport's going to be 2 hours at this point to get them. So can you go ahead and get a CT and power share it to me so we can look at it at this point? Yeah.
Any other comments?
Dr. Benjamin had a comment online saying pretty timely, actually, not too much additional workup for us.
And who is that?
Dr. Benjamin.
That was me. I don't know if you can hear me, but
Yeah. So Elizabeth, so you feel that there's no unnecessary delay to Grady, that you're getting appropriate patients?
I mean, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
Tom,
say
go.
like none, but I think that in general, We've had, I think, I don't know who was speaking earlier from Augusta, but we have sort of a similar thing of, we get the call and we say, okay, bring them on over. And I would say in general, we're not getting a lot of people, having done a ton of workup before they call us. I think most of the centers, trauma and non-trauma centers, have been pretty, uh, I don't know, pretty good about calling us early. And I agree, transport is often difficult, but I would say the norm, I I find that people get them to us pretty quickly. I don't know if that's just regional for where we are, but I've been pretty pleasantly surprised with people calling appropriately and transferring appropriately, despite I know all of the challenges that people face in rural areas.
Okay, well, that's great. Dr. Ashley, what about Macon? Does Macon get, um, you have a fairly large referral base and a fairly large referral base of non-trauma centers. Do they, are you getting calls from people that have been pan scanned already prior to the decision to transfer?
Yes. We're, like you, our first word is, we've scripted with the trauma surgeons, sure, we'll take that patient. But then I do get, a lot of patients that are pan scan, have a lot of, a lot of scans. We have transportation issues as well, that we might accept the patient or do accept them and, but then they not get to us for hours. And it's not because they did a long workup. It's because of, they just don't have transportation. I would say things are better than it used to be years and years ago, but I think we're still, sometimes I think in my head, like when I hear the history, and this is what sort of clicked for me. I'm following the history and I'm like thinking, okay, this is what I need to do. And then this test has been done, this test has been done, so, several CAT scans. And I'm like thinking, we really probably didn't need any of those scans. You just, when you gave me the first sentence, that you could have just called me and transported the patient. So I think there's still some need for in my opinion, I think there's still some need for education, even though I think things are better than they used to be, that to tell people like, it's okay not to scan everything, just send that patient. Because I think you've heard different going around the room here. It's really good to hear. I think every trauma director in the room is pretty much just, that's their going statement. Send me the patient, send me. I don't feel like we're pushing back like maybe in years past we did, but so I think that's good. But I think probably just continue to beat that drum to get the word out to say, it's okay. It's okay. I think that's the word that needs to come from us. It's okay not to scan everything. If you've made a diagnosis that means they need to be transported, get them here as soon as possible. And I think that was a good point with pediatrics too. We've learned a lot with, CHOA and you all from Augusta. And as we've done little projects over the years, I know we've certainly decreased the amount of radiation at our facility following some of your protocols. Uh, and I think out there probably, and even in adults, sometimes I'll say, don't scan because I know what I'm looking for with my scanners, in our protocols, we may get a better scan. So I think that's extremely important in the kids, in the pediatric population.
Yeah, I guess there's really two types of patients that I'm concerned about. That fall into the category of scan or not scan. It's the person, for example, the elderly patient who comes in who falls, but is a GCS 15. That patient's probably going to get scanned up by the small little ER prior to being sent because they don't know if they have a head bleed or not. But and those scans are probably appropriate. It's the patient who comes in hypotensive, altered mental status, and it's a small ER with no surgical capability. I think those are the patients that probably shouldn't get scanned, that should be transported. But as you mentioned before, transportation in Georgia is a real issue, especially inter-facility transfers.
I'm sorry. First of all, this is Greg Patterson again. Comment about the centers in Georgia. The ones and twos that we've had to deal with have never said no. And the one that I have to deal with the most in proximity to me says maybe all the time. They want us to do things. And so it's not a nationwide thought process is going here. This is a Georgia process that I think you're talking about, which is to me the best process, that, you know, you don't need so many tests, just send them on. We're required to get so many things from one of the centers that we send people to. It's in Florida. I'll just tell you, I mean, they want this done, they want this done, they want this done before they'll accept them. And you're teaching two different methods to the ER doctors and the trauma people about what they're doing. As far as, is there any way, I think the biggest issue that we see is that first ambulance crew that drops that patient off at that smaller hospital, and they're trying to resuscitate them and do whatever they can do and need to do before they call us. That other ambulance crew is already gone now. If there's any way to speed up this process of transferring them and get Georgia to change their laws to require that ambulance service to take them on to the next level of care, would be a great benefit in the state. Because we can't find an ambulance service now to transfer certain people outside their catchment area. They just won't do it.
Any other questions or comments? So I think, I guess this is a personal viewpoint. I think something like this would potentially be helpful for the outlying hospitals that aren't trauma centers. It may not be necessarily necessary for all hospitals, because it sounds like some hospitals are transferring patients expeditiously, which is what we want. But I think universally, I think it wouldn't hurt to send a document like this out, even if the people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, just as a reminder. But that's just my point.
I think that would be reasonable, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It wasn't perfect the last time, you know, the burn poster is not perfect, but it's certainly a help. I think what would help Dr. Vassy would be, number one, I guess, is this something, you know, I guess we should vote, see if this is what, just to see if people, is this something that you all would be willing, you want to form a little subcommittee, like when I say subcommittee, 4 or 5 people, just to take what's already done. There's 2 or 3 renditions of this. There's another one that's a little more involved. It's got a lot of writing on it. There's this one, but basically to take this and just say, we need, if you agree to do this, 4 or 5 people to say, I sort of like the way it looks. I like the colors. I like the bullet points, or I want to delete a few bullet points. And then to work on a brief letter, like a couple of paragraphs, just like explaining what it's for. And sometimes it's okay to send without scanning, that kind of thing. So I guess the 2 questions I have to the group, is this something you want to do as a group? And if so, then obviously we'd need some volunteers. But I think, first of all, you know, do we have a motion that we would want to attack this project? We get a motion from Dr. Patterson and a second from Dr. Dunn. So it's open, it's up for discussion. We've really been discussing, but are there any other comments? Yeah, that's a great idea, Greg. That's a great idea. So I don't know if you could hear him. He was saying, yeah, I don't know if you could hear Dr. Patterson, but he was talking about March pause, which are y'all familiar with that? With what? All right. Why don't you educate the group here? This is really a cool thing that Greg's been working on. So why don't you bring that in and then go ahead.
Sure. March Pause is a program we've been working on for about 18 months through a grant from the state. We're just having issues with getting it off the ground completely, but it basically takes the March Pause of the military, if you know what that is. It's a algorithm they teach combat TCCC, the Trauma Combat Casualty course, and it's basically an ATLS algorithm for the average soldier to use on the battlefield. The TCCC course, of course, teaches a few different things, but we tried to change this into a civilian March Pause. And so now we've kind of called it C-March Pause, standing for civilian. So it stands for massive bleeding, airway, resuscitation, circulation, hypothermia. It goes through all these little things that are easy for them to do on the battlefield. And we changed this into a civilian course similar to the concept that ACS had for the rural trauma development concept, but different in that we're not trying to teach, we're not trying to have the level ones and level twos come down and teach the small centers. We're trying to have everybody teach everybody. And we wanted to develop a project that could be taught in 4 hours and go to a rural hospital, either do it online or bring mannequins to them to do some fun things so they see some basic issues. We're not trying to teach them everything in ATLS at all. We're trying to teach them some basic skills where you have maybe a nurse practitioner alone in the ER or an ER physician that may be moonlighting, maybe an ophthalmologist moonlighting, who knows? But in that circumstance, press to them transfer, and utilize the transfer algorithm that is available through the GTC website that lists all the trauma centers in Georgia, their contact information, how to transfer a patient to them. We give them that, give them this, and ultimately try to teach them in these smaller rural hospitals that you do have someone who's going to listen to you. You do have someone who's going to say yes, and you do have someone who's going to take your patient. And when we know that you're scared to death at this point, you know, they would rather have a massive cardiac patient come in than a trauma patient because they just don't know what to do at that point in these smaller rural hospitals to get these things. Does March Pause include pediatrics? Not a direct, I mean, yes, it basically kind of teaches you a little bit of that, but it's not anything direct. We kind of put that out there that we would, you know, probably need something more to transfer or some criteria for peds. But we didn't have time literally to put that into play. I think more iterations of this in the future when I'm dead and gone, you know, hopefully it will continue on, but you know, I think we would have those things in there. I think you could even dovetail burn things in there and use, you know, you know, when to call the burn lines and when to call pediatrics and when to call adult at this point. Yeah. 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 Right. Right. You could even incorporate it into that. Yeah. Right. 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 I think it would ultimately help. And the more causes I think we can tie together, I think the more we show that this is a network.
Hi, David Carney from Children's in Atlanta. I think that this is a good start because we do, at all the regional centers, we want to get the patients into our facilities quicker. But the reality of the transportation issues is more evident than ever. And so I think as a group, there's two things that we need to kind of foster. One, in 2024, every facility in Georgia should have power share capability. It just should be non-negotiable. And we need to really push for that because and then we also have to push for our internal radiology colleagues to be willing to overread those films, because the biggest thing that we see is both the misidentification of injury or the misinterpretation of imaging. And so our protocol now is what's wrong with you? And then the second question is, where are you? And we're fortunate to have quite a bit more resources than most facilities, but if we know they're 2 hours away and our only option is ground transportation, the algorithm changes with what we advise. We're going to demand a set of imaging and we're going to give them the cadence with which we want the imaging. And then those images are coming to us live so we can help triage at their facility. And I think that the major centers, I think, should try to move toward that a little bit, because the reality is you're just not going to get these people, even if they have these injuries, most people aren't going to come for 2 or 3 hours. And there's an opportunity to intervene, because if you have an unstable patient, the tendency at the outside facilities, they want to do something. And frequently that something is not ideal.
Great comments, Dr. Carney.
Since the transportation issue such is a statewide problem, are there any legislative levers we can push as a group to address it?
So, those are great questions. And so I'm trying to figure out where to put that on the sheet of music here. Uh, So we really need to get involved with that. Um, and this won't solve the transportation piece because it's just really what we're talking about here is just it, does your patient, maybe, you're not used to seeing trauma patients, non-trauma center, rural area, or even downtown Atlanta, non-trauma center, but when do I need to transfer? When do I need to March Pauls helps me identify I'm in trouble here, these issues, and these are a few things I can do, and then I need to transfer. So that's the whole purpose of the discussion here is how we fix that piece. And I think we've got away with what Greg was talking about on how to do that. So now there seems to be a lot of interest in, and that's a brilliant idea about managing the patient almost almost, just talking on the phone, redneck, not telemedicine, but just a phone, give them some blood, do this. That's a great idea on how to intervene. And that's a whole nother level. But what we do need to work on as a trauma medical directors group, and I don't think we have the answer, is then how do we pivot into helping our state with this transport thing, which is really getting into I mean, it's a disaster. I won't bore you with you. Everybody's got their story, but just a case the other night, if it's bad when I'm looking at my watch going, where's the patient? Even if I notice after multiple traumas coming through, I know, where's that patient? And they just couldn't get an ambulance. And so we all deal with that. So there is when you mentioned legislative, what can we do? Not to put Liz on the spot, but she knows probably a little more about it, or actually a lot more about it than I do. Could you give us just a very brief to answer Dr. Dent's question about what's going on legislative? There was some activity. The legislators know about this problem. They've heard the issue. And they're looking to do something. Maybe you could bring them up to speed on what they're trying to do. But there was a bill on the floor about how to at least have a pilot project to experiment to see how we could get past this. And I don't think it passed, or maybe part of it passed. But anyway, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, Liz Atkins, for those I haven't met, I am Dr. Ashley's partner in crime. Try to keep them squared away. There was a bill, Senate Bill 515, that was to fund an EMS pilot project. And that would have really helped you out, Phoebe, because the target was Region 8 and Region 2 to put 2 ambulances at $4.1 million. And that came out of the Senate Rural Health Professional Recruitment and Retention Senate study that was done last fall. And that was some of the recommendations that came out was, look, we can't get patients moved. It's like they heard it loud and clear. So Bo Hatchett was the sponsor of that legislation. It never passed, but the line item was still there. It was still there when it was signed last Thursday, but Katie and I just got an email today. They halved it. They didn't leave the 4.1 in, but they put 2.05. But now they're telling us they're not going to give it to us because 515 didn't pass. I know it's so frustrating because we've talked about it with the EMS community and there's interest in doing something like this. And it would be specifically for interfacility. So it would be something that I loved your idea about. Remember when you talked about organ transplantation, like there's a need for like when the patient moves up really high priority on the list, like boom, some kind of light goes off and like, where the critical patient is sitting and they have to move. It's not like, oh, we need them to move because we don't have staff for the bed or whatever. It's like they're sick and they need to go. So having some kind of mechanism to identify the patients need to go. And then we still thought with $2 million, we could do 2 ambulances and maybe we could start in Region 8 because that's so wide. At least there's better air coverage, reliable air coverage in Region 2. Not saying for your Region 2 folks that you're flush by any means, but like at least it would be a good pilot to start in one region. But now they're saying the money's cut. So it's really sad. Somehow we have to make a better story so they know. Now, Bo Hatchett.
What that 2 or 4 million was going to do, like,
Yeah.
I don't think they had it worked out, but what in theory, how that ambulance might work.
Okay. So just to, Dr. Ashley asked me to cover what the, right, what the money was going to be for. So I think in talking with our EMS colleagues, the thought was that for staff and for, at the state, we don't want to get in the business of buying ambulances, but you could lease an ambulance and staff it for about $1 million a year. And then some additional money for somebody to oversee the program, right? Because if you don't have somebody who's got eyes on this all the time, that's their main focus, and you just try to contract with somebody that's their part-time role, it's not going to be successful. So somebody to oversee it, and then the money for the staff and the ambulances. And this theoretically, and again, it only ever got early conversations, Dr. Ashley, because we never, it didn't go anywhere. So, the thought was that somebody who was already a licensed 911 provider in the state would kind of bid on this. Like we would work through the EMS zoning process. I don't know how familiar you all are with that, but that'll make you want to poke your eyes out a little bit when you get into the zoning. It's, it's set up for good reason, but to kind of leverage that existing process to get 911 providers, to get somebody who's qualified to bid on running the service. And then they would also, as part of it, they would have to have the ability to do dispatch, not 911 dispatch, but some way to identify, hey, you've got the patient in your facility, they're ready to go, like some mechanism to call and accept calls, record calls, share data on volume and that kind of stuff. So to start up with some kind of metrics, but essentially the money was supposed to be for a little over 4 million, the $1 million per truck, 2 trucks, 24/7, just to handle interfacility. Did that answer it?
Can you tell us why it didn't pass or just, I never did quite figure that out.
Yeah, it actually was,
There seemed to be so much.
it passed the Senate. I think it just ran out of time. I don't know if any of you, we were watching on Sine Die down to the very end because the budget wasn't approved until 10:30 at night. Katie and I were on the phone like, are we getting our money or not? And so it got past the Senate, and then apparently the House favorably reported on it, but they never passed it. So it never made its way through. So I don't think it's something that folks aren't going to want to support in the future. It just didn't make it across the line. The way the legislative session works now, I think, because the way the sessions are connected, it's going to have to start all over again, though.
Thanks, Liz.
But just to demonstrate that the legislators do know this, there was a prominent state Georgia senator and a prominent state congressman who both were involved in a trauma and both had experienced firsthand delays in transfer to a higher level of care, to the point where they had to call the fire department to come and transfer them via fire truck because there was no ambulance available to take them to where they needed to go to get to a trauma center. So to say that the legislatures aren't aware of this is false. I just don't understand why it hasn't passed. But to Liz, Dr. Carney, I don't know if you were here when Dr. Carney mentioned about the possibility of PACS, mandating PACS for all hospitals or transfer, radiologic images transfer. In order to make that happen, the only way I can see that is to go through GHA, is to have GHA lay down a line. I don't even know if they can do that, to mandate that all hospitals or the contracts we have for our receiving hospitals, that if you're going to transfer a trauma patient to us, you have to have PACS transfer capability. Is that even a possibility, or is it just influence and with individual centers?
So interestingly enough, at that Senate healthcare study back in the fall, there was a radiologist there who was from, is there some professional organization in the state for radiologists? Anyway, some of this image transfer stuff got brought up, and they were very willing to work with us on some way. It's a little bit beyond my scope and what I understand. I mean, I know a little bit about that from my prior life, but I think that is an untapped, I think that's something we could try to get the right people at the table to move forward with. I don't know if that would take, again, an injection of money. I'm not really sure what some of the drivers behind that would be, but I think with the person who was there from the radiology association was, said that it is doable, it is here, and they they didn't understand why there wasn't widespread adoption of it, but I don't know all the modalities besides, cloud-based PACS and that kind of thing to get image transfer. So I don't know if they're talking about another kind of mechanism to do it or what's out there or.
We all have to be on the same, like some of us on Cerner, some of us on Epic. Everyone has to be on the same system, basically. And that well, it's interesting that you say that. Just in Augusta, Georgia, we can barely get the films from over Piedmont Hospital to Wellstar. And by the time you get them, they go through these rigmarole. Whereas if we all had Epic or all had Cerner, it'd be a moot point. It's because it's just not that easy. Everyone is saying it's that easy. It's just not that easy. And the other thing we can do is the telemedicine. I recall it was a couple times I was on telemedicine with them from a surgeon standpoint, and some of the things I couldn't answer. And I got my PICU doctor on the line with me. It was a 3-way telemedicine, which was very easy. And it put the ER physician at ease because people don't understand that NP, because sometimes we're dealing with NPs, we're dealing with PAs. They are so nervous. They just want someone to talk to. And then when you say to them, well, here's the pressure. Here, get this. They don't really want to hear that. They'll acquiesce and say, okay, but they want to hear a sense. I'm gonna take care of this patient. I'm right here with you. And don't worry about it. It's kind of like your mama or daddy holding your hand when you're a baby. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, I think it's doable, but I think the whole state's going to have to get involved with it as far as records and all. That's the only way, that's the only way it's going to work, especially if we can't get the ambulance service and the likes.
To some historical perspective on this from a telemedicine standpoint, Vassy himself brought up this concept last year, talking about telemedicine. So it's not something we've not talked about as from the TMD standpoint, but one of his own pet projects was telemedicine. And we can all these things dovetail into the bottom line is getting the patient to the right center quicker than what we're doing right now. So anything that can help will help.
Thanks. Go ahead, Dr. Patterson.
Hey, this is Mac McKimmey. I'm the TMD at Atrium Health Floyd in Rome, which is a level 2. So everybody's bringing up great points. Delays in transfer because we don't have ambulance services funding for that, unifying the teleradiology, the telemed option. Those are all great things. I'm going to take it a notch further. Why don't we just take the patient to the trauma center directly? And I know I'm opening a can of worms. So I'm about 10 minutes from the Alabama line. So we participate in the Alabama Trauma Network, and I've been verified twice through them. And they have a great system. They call Birmingham and like Med Control, and they tell you where to take the patient. So, and we have a computer system that says if your green lights all the way across, you got ICU beds, you got a doctor on call, you got hospital beds, then it's a green light and it's go. And so it's very simple. So between us and Birmingham, there's no level 2. And between us and Huntsville, there's no level 2. So they use a lot more helicopter services and they just take the patient. So that saves you the transfer and the getting the funding. That saves you having to worry about PACS. That saves you worrying about Telerad. You just take them directly to the trauma center if they meet these criteria on that piece of paper that we're circulating. I know that's a can of worms. I know it's a bunch of political stuff, but that's what we need to be doing. So
Yeah, that clearly is the gold standard, and that would solve a lot of problems. The issue becomes when you only have one truck running 911 in a county that the patient's injured in, and you're 2 hours away from a trauma center. If you take that patient all the way to the trauma center, then your whole county doesn't have 911 coverage for 2 hours, and they're just not willing to do that. But you're right. These issues are complex, and they're not easy to solve. But I think we're all experiencing similar issues. And I think we're just trying to come up with short-term solutions to a much bigger problem. But clearly, the obvious answer is transfer the patient directly to a designated trauma center that can handle the issues. That would solve a lot of issues, but so
No, I think that was good, Brother Mac. All I can say is amen. I could say a lot more as Liz is looking at me here, but I won't say. I'll be quiet. But you're exactly right. One thing you can do until we get that piece fixed, and there is a way to fix that. But in our region, we actually sat down and wrote our regional plan, and I think your region has one. I'm not sure. I've lost a little track of all the different 10 regions, but we actually wrote it in our plan that the commander on the ground, or I forget what they're called, you can bypass, one or two hospitals and go to the trauma center. And now that may seem simple. Well, but paramedic in the back of a truck, there's a hospital right there. Do I go right there? But this is a gunshot wound to the chest. They don't have a surgeon. I'm going to go on down the road another 30 miles to the trauma center. But what if they die? Am I going to be in trouble? Are they going to yell at me? And so we actually put in our plan that, it's okay. Again, we're into saying okay today. It's okay to bypass the local hospital and go, so that if the patient dies or the paramedic, it's in our plan that, and we don't mandate like call helicopter, do this. We just say, consider, do these things. And this happens in our region, like the paramedics in Houston. If you know anything about Macon and Houston County, Bibb County, Houston County, the county over, they have a good hospital in Houston County. They're not the Houston County Medical Center. They have some surgeons there that do great general surgery, but they're not a trauma center. They're not built for a trauma center. They're not built for speed at 2 o'clock in the morning. And if the paramedics are down in that area at the Houston County and they get a gunshot wound to the chest, they're going to make the run. They're not going to go to Houston. They're going to come to us, and we know them, and it's okay. And there's no questions asked. So there are a few things that you can do in your local region to write it down that you can do, but you're absolutely right. We need a state communication center to get the people to the right place at the right time, just like Alabama, and it can work. Okay. So shall we go ahead and then this has been really a great discussion, but we've covered like 10 years worth of work here in 20 minutes. But going back to the motion on the floor is to proceed with a letter and design a letter and a poster to send out that's tied to March Paws that will help our centers at least start the process, do some things, consider transfer quickly, and we're willing and accept and want to take your patients. So I guess we just need to vote on that motion then. All those can you? Yeah, maybe just the people online. So Gabby, can you monitor? I can't see it. I'll just take nays since it's a hybrid meeting. Any nays to that? There's none in the room here. Any online, Gabby? So we can let Dr. Vassy know that carries. And so I'm sure that he would want to know the next question. Is there any volunteers, 4 or 5 people that would want to work on that? Greg, you want to sort of have to with the March Paws. Somebody want to help you? Mac? Okay. David? Okay. And is that Courtney back? Okay. Don't have my glasses on. Okay. Courtney, you getting all these, Gabby? David Carney, Mac McKimmey, Greg Patterson, Courtney Bedford. Okay. I think that'll be a good start. And anybody else that wants to jump in, if you're shy, and I'm sure the group would welcome the help. Okay. All right. Good discussion. What else?
I want to stay on time here. I don't want to, this is built for a 1-hour meeting. So Liz, you had asked the TMD group to consider EMS. Can you just explain that a little bit? I think that it's up on the slide.
Thanks. So the EMS committee, as part of the funding that goes to EMS, they do, you guys know for your trauma centers, you get readiness and uncompensated care. What they essentially get that offsets their readiness, they don't get any uncompensated care really, but they use their money for an equipment grant. And I'll tell you that it ends up boiling down to about $800 an ambulance. It's not a whole lot of money, but they have to submit an application to us and they have to say what they're going to buy with the money. And we see a whole lot of batteries, iPads, tough books. So we just want to make sure that the intent of the grant is to take care of trauma patients. So we're not saying that those things aren't important, particularly if you're a rural services. Sometimes they need, that money makes a huge difference to them to buy a new tough book or something. If they need something to access their PCR in the truck, for sure. But is there anything that would, and we don't have to, you don't have to make this decision today, but because I think Dr. Vassie had kind of floated it out, but we need to have some rigorous discussion around, is there anything you feel strongly about that, like, if you don't have this, you should have it before you purchase replacement batteries and, like, you know, things of that nature. We include anything that's on the list of required equipment, which I'm not really sure that we should do that, because if you're a 911 zone provider, licensed provider, you should have that regardless of whether we're giving you money. So, and there is a list, and I'm not sure if Dr. Vassie sent it. If not, I can send it to you. That is the list of what they buy, but there is an evidence-based list that was published by, I think it was a group effort between like ASEP and maybe NASEMSO and COT, NAEMT, a bunch of groups got together on a consensus about what was required to take care. But this is, what you're seeing here is just what they submit to us for reimbursement. So it was really just brought up on your agenda just so that, because the EMS committee actually asked us to go to you and say, what do the trauma directors say that patients come in that they don't have, or that, you know, they're really struggling with. So just floating that out there to see if you all have any suggestions of things that you have identified that are an issue in your practice areas that you'd like to see.
Leon Dent from Phoebe. In terms of pediatric monitoring equipment on the ambulances, is that a requirement? We had an issue where, you know, we had a transfer and like, I'm not sure if it was just blood pressure cuffs and things like that. Okay. I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I reviewed the list, and at least from a level 1 facility, the patients that we receive, I don't wish that the EMS community had something different than they don't, except for potential blood products. Especially on the long transports, the 2-hour transports. You know, we're getting BLS crews with sick people, and it would be nice if they had blood, but I don't think BLS are allowed to transfuse blood.
I know that the proliferation of availability of blood on 911 units we're at least getting there. But I think it is cost prohibitive in some. Were we not talking about that, Crystal? You can comment on that. Yeah, put your mic on.
I think it is cost prohibitive, but we're seeing some advancements that are going to allow us to bring that cost down a good bit. The temperature monitoring is something that we've nearly navigated. And then Northeast Georgia is using a different system that they're not requiring the fluid warmer, which is about $3,000 a unit. So those two cost savings are about $5,000 per project. So hopefully that's something that now we see the cost come down to around $4,000, $4,500 per unit that's carrying it. Obviously that's before product.
So how would they warm it when it's going in if they don't have the?
So Northeast Georgia, what they were discussing at the Region 5 RTAC meeting was they're using a disposable heated blanket for the patient and the LifeFlow device, which is providing cold plasma, but they're heating the patient, which was that was the first time that I have heard that, but an interesting idea. That's not the LifeFlow or the Quantum, which is what we're using in Region 10. which is a warming device. But the problem with that is it's $150 per drip set, which is the cost prohibitive part. We have grants that are helping us purchase those. But obviously the ongoing cost of the service is extensive.
Is the quantum that you mentioned the same as the Q inflow for the live flow?
It is.
All right, I think that's all I had. There's any other burning questions that you guys, as a group, as a TMD group, feel we need to address as a system in Georgia that we're not doing effectively, that make your job easier, make your job easier to take care of patients and provide good quality care?
Dr. Dunn?
Transportation is obviously a huge problem, and I don't know if I necessarily have the answer to that, but
Hey, Dr. Dunn, online, I just want to add, Dr. Benjamin had recommended fluid warmers and Dr. Johnson recommended warm blankets.
on the EMS?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Liz, I think this group, what you talked about with the transportation, there's a lot of interest and energy in the TMD group. And as this is probably going to circle back around to the Capitol, and I know EMS, the subcommittee's vested in this, it may be good to do a handshake or have, when we go back to the Capitol, to try and get some transportation needs. I think this group needs to have a voice. So just, I think just to make sure Dr. Vassy is well informed and this group is part of the energy to go to the Capitol. We can't wait till January. There's work that'll need to be done about what we're going to ask for. You know, do we do the same for ambulances and the pilot project or whatever? But anyway, I just want to make sure the TMD group's involved. So. That's all I got.
Okay, folks, thank you for your attention. I appreciate it and enjoy the rest of the meeting. Thank you.